everybody, and welcome back to the Transfer Portal Podcast presented by NoContextCFB. It's still the offseason. You can count the days until the next game, but it's gonna take a while. So let's just ride. Let's just ride the offseason. There's gonna be a lot happening, and we're gonna be here talking about all of it. I'm with you today, Andrew. We also got Dylan and Brian also here to talk about some stuff. You know, it's been a weird few years for college football. Let's kind of bring this into a broader scale. Transfer portal, not just us, but the actual transfer portal. It's brought a new variant to college football. You know, you can see one of your favorite players, you know, if he's not getting enough snaps on his team, he'll go to a different program where he's going to get what he believes is his fair share. So a lot of transfers have happened over the last few years, but we're going to talk about this offseason specifically. Let's talk about some of our favorite transfers. Dylan, I'll start with you. What's a transfer that kind of popped out to you as soon as you saw it and you're kind of thinking about it more and it's wow, that this is a really good transfer for both this program and this player?
Yeah, I think I really like Cameron Ward from Incarnate Word going to Washington State. I didn't really get to watch a lot of the FCS this season, but after we kind of heard the rumblings of him possibly going to Wazoo, I was looking at some film and the stats don't lie. I mean, the dude absolutely balled out. He crushed it. And I think in that offense, I think he's just going to light it up. And I also really like Jaden DeLora moving on, going to Arizona. I'm biting it a little bit with Arizona. I think this is going to be a really good team. I should say really good, comparatively a really good team. The team that's gone 10-31 in the last 4 years can't get a lot worse. So I like the additions that Arizona's made. It's hard to replace a quarterback like Jaden DeLora, who, looked to be kind of the quarterback of the future, but they got a guy in Cameron Ward who, I think can really up the ante for their offense.
Brian, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm kind of tied with Mario Williams going to USC or Dylan Gabriel going to Oklahoma. I think, obviously Mario Williams going with Lincoln Riley, where, obviously his offenses are insane. That could definitely be some fun, and just the plethora of transfers going to USC, that definitely seems like a very fun team in the Pac-12, and that the Pac-12 after dark and just the high scoring offenses that are in the Pac-12, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch that. But I'm kind of changing my answer back and forth with Dylan Gabriel as well. Dylan Gabriel finally getting some good weapons around him and a good, Power 5 team and facilities and everything around him. That might be he was very, very, very good with UCF. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he does with Oklahoma. So I know he's not going to have Lincoln Riley, so that offense is going to look a little bit differently. But they're still have a plethora of 5 stars. They have a lot of weapons that he can throw the ball to. So I think I'm going to go with Dylan Gabriel at Oklahoma.
Yeah, let's just hope he doesn't transfer again. He's already done it twice. I'm surprised no one said anything about what Alabama's done. Alabama, they just went to the national championship. Obviously, they lost Brian, but they got a heck of a lot of talent, as Brian has pointed to his national championship hat for the Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, Eli Ricks from LSU, Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech, like these guys at Alabama, I don't know like what it is with Alabama. It's not even just that they're elite recruiting. They're getting these elite players from the portal. Jahmyr Gibbs is one of, if not maybe the best running back in the nation. And then you've got Eli Ricks and a heck of a corner. So I'm not shocked because it's Alabama, but I am surprised Alabama is kind of...
And Jermaine Burton.
I forgot about that. They're just getting everybody. Watch out, every other school. Alabama's coming for your best player. Not to say that Jermaine Burton was Georgia's best player.
Well, he was our best receiver, which I don't understand.
Yeah.
How do you become a wide receiver? You're wide receiver 1 for the national championship winning team, and you transfer to the team that you beat. I don't know. I'm not whatever.
You and Mecole Hardman have the same quarrel with him. Mecole Hardman said something on social media about what the heck are you doing going from Georgia to Alabama, as Georgia just beat Alabama. That's a different topic all in itself. but just how Alabama has adapted over the last few years to the changes in the sport, it just shows how elite they are. They're elite on the field, off the field, getting players, keeping players. It's Alabama, folks. It's the same story for the last however many years for the next however many years. But next, let's talk about some questions we got on Twitter. We released a tweet earlier asking for some of your questions, and we got two of them right here. We'll start with the aforementioned USC. Lincoln Riley, new head coach of the Trojans. How many years do we think it's going to take for USC to get to the playoff under Lincoln Riley? Let's start with the Pac-12 guy right here, Dylan. What do you think?
Yeah, so I wrote an article shortly after Lincoln Riley got hired about is USC back? And obviously they didn't make all the moves in the transfer portal yet, like Mario Williams, Travis Dye, which I'm absolutely butthurt about. And, you know, a lot of those other guys from the Pac-12, like Brendan Rice and Micaiah Blackman, Terrell Bynum, Austin Jones, like they've just been stealing everybody from the Pac-12. And so there's still work to be done. I don't definitely think it's not going to be you know, within the first couple of years of his tenure. You just don't really see coaches in their first year with the program take that program to the college football playoff right away. I don't know if they're going to be set up in the Pac-12 to make a run. They'd probably have to have a schedule similar to what Oregon had last year and is going to have this year, where, you know, they have a really good non-conference opponent. And if they win that game, and, you know, maybe go through the Pac-12 with one loss or undefeated, then they have a shot. But it's the Pac-12. It just cannibalizes itself from the inside. And so, you know, it doesn't really matter how good a USC or an Oregon is. You know, come November, you could see Oregon lose to Arizona in Tucson or Cal in Berkeley. You know, you could see USC lose to a really bad Stanford team. Like it doesn't really matter all the time, you know, how good a team is on paper. You just can't bet. You can't bet in the Pac-12. So I think it's going to be a while. I think at some point they are going to find it once, you know, a lot of these recruits start coming in and they see the product that Lincoln Riley can bring to Southern California. But I think they are going to get there. I don't know if I'd promise a natty, like a championship right away, but I think they could definitely be within the top 10, you know, as soon as maybe the end of next year. I feel like they could be a Rose Bowl team if they keep adding, you know, in the trenches and on that defense, building what they already had before Clay Helton got fired. And then, you know, on the recruiting trail, the state of California is just oozing with talent. All the top prospects, all those insane high schools that just breed insane talent. It's insane. Maybe that's an inappropriate verb, but there's so much talent there that USC is going to get that they weren't getting a couple years ago when they were getting stomped in the Pac-12 every year, going 4-8, 5-7. So I think they're going to be back. Maybe not to the level of, you know, the Matt Leinart days, the Carson Palmer days, but and you know, Pete Carroll, I guess, to kind of wrap all that up. But I think they are going to be like a perennial 9-10 win team. Maybe I'd say in a 3 to 4 year window.
Ryan?
Yeah, I agree with everything that that he said. You know, it's I think I look at the couple of key years coming up, and there's two that I really look at is whether it's 2023, 2024, 2025, when Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC. That's going to open up a whole different avenue for a lot of these other conferences to make playoffs. You know, the last few, you look at, besides this year, you look at the last few years, it's been Oklahoma, you know, pretty much solidifying a spot just because they've been winning the Big 12 every year in the playoff. And this year, obviously, that didn't happen, but you kind of saw that avenue open up, and that definitely opens up for a team from the Pac-12. You know, I mean, we saw early on in the college football playoff, we had the teams like Washington and Oregon, you know, make it in with really, really good football teams, and kind of just being the best team in the Pac-12 can be enough sometimes. So I think with having that kind of, you know, the Texas and Oklahomas out of the Big 12 and kind of letting them go into the bloodbath that the SEC is, you're going to see you're going to open up a lot of avenues for a lot of different conferences, whether it's the Big 10, the Pac-12, you know, maybe even the American Conference, to kind of wiggle their way into the playoffs. So I think that's going to be the big kind of jump it's going to take I'm not going to say that's a deal breaker, but it's definitely an avenue that opens up for a team like USC. And then, you have a great coach in Lincoln Riley. We've already seen all these transfers coming in, like Dylan alluded to. And, you with the way the NIL and the transfer portal is, and you kind of sell a recruit playing for Lincoln Riley in Los Angeles, in the Coliseum, that is definitely a recipe for success. So I don't think it's going to take long at all. I think maybe within the next 2 or 3 years, I see Lincoln Riley making the playoffs. We saw he made the playoffs almost every year with Oklahoma. He was a head coach. So I think maybe by 2023, 2024, they'll be in the playoffs. Like I said, I'm not saying they're going to win, but maybe like a Michigan type run where they kind of just, a lot of teams kind of beat each other up, and Michigan was in there for the taking to get into the playoffs. Winning it is one thing, but making it, I can see it in maybe a couple years for sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the middle, but I'm also thinking about this one lingering dependent variable. Are we going to get an expansion of the playoff? Because that would make it a heck of a lot easier for USC. Because say they go 10-2, and that's enough to win the South possibly, and they beat whoever comes out of the North, and then we have an 11-2 USC. 11-2 USC makes it in a 6-8 whatever team playoff most likely, unless we just have a lot of undefeated teams, which would be quite odd. But if we're looking at the 14 playoff, because slight off topic, I'm quite pessimistic upon playoff expansion. I don't think we're going to get that for a while. Say we're with the 14 format. It's not happening this year. We all know that it's not happening. Next year, I would be quite surprised. I want to see Lincoln get a full set of recruiting in, not just like, oh, he just got thrown in, now he's recruiting, even though he was pretty successful. What he needs to do, and we've all known this, since he took the job, he needs to make USC the prime spot to go for prospects coming out of Southern California. You're seeing kids go to the SEC, to the ACC, but they have one of the biggest names. When you think of USC, you think of prestige. You think of just college football at its finest. You think of that game versus Texas. It doesn't need to go back to that right now, but it needs to, elevate back to close to where it was. So if Lincoln Riley can do that, I have no doubt that he can, get a lot of talent out of the transfer portal. He can do it in 3-4 years just because of how much talent is in Southern California. It's not an overnight thing. That's what you got to realize. Rome wasn't built in a day. The Coliseum wasn't. The LA Coliseum. See what I'm getting at? It's not going to take one day, USC fans, but just know your future is a lot brighter than it was last year. Trust me on that. Next up, we're going to talk about second question. Quinn Ewers, number 1 prospect, went to Ohio State, and then he played, I think, 2 snaps, had 2 handoffs against, I want to say it was Michigan State, and he dipped, went to the school that he originally committed to, Texas. So I want to ask you guys, we'll start with Brian this time. How do we think Quinn Ewers is going to perform this year as his first real year as a college football player?
Yeah, when you look at somebody that talented, or at least he's supposed to be that talented, it shouldn't take him long at all to succeed. We've seen freshman quarterbacks and he's a freshman. Honestly, we're not. That year at Ohio State doesn't count. This was supposed to be his graduation year anyway, so he's a freshman. That's just that Ohio State stuff didn't count. But I will say though, taking that back, a year in college football is still a year in college football. But we saw what Trevor Lawrence did. We saw what Jake Fromm did as true freshmen coming in and starting and winning games. And one of the key things that those teams had around them was talent and coaching. Both of them were very talented on both sides of the ball. They both had elite coaching. So that's basically the X factor for Quinn Ewers. What kind of talent does he have around him? He does have some players around him and recruits that are coming in this cycle that are pretty good. And we have to see how Steve Sarkisian does year 2. What he did this past year offensively was really good with Casey Thompson. Casey Thompson probably benefited the most with having Steve Sarkisian as a head coach and the play caller there. So we have to see how that relationship develops. I think Steve Sarkisian is probably one of the best offensive coaches in college football. He's had that he's been under Nick Saban, so he has that elite experience on under his belt as well. So I don't, that's going to be the X factor. What is the chemistry like between those two? And if it's good, I can see Quinn Ewers being very, very, very good. I don't want to say they're going to make a playoffs or anything like that, but I do expect him, if the relationship is good between them, I do think that Quinn Ewers can definitely be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Maybe, can have that run where he's kind of in the Heisman conversation. I don't think he'll end up winning it. I think there's a lot of talent out there better than him at the moment, or at least more experience. But there's definitely talent there. And I think that if he can gel with Steve Sarkisian in that offense, which I think he can, I expect it to be very, very good.
Dylan, what do you got?
I feel like Quinn Ewers is like the epitome of just college football in a nutshell now, right? Like he opted out early, opted out of high school early to go to Ohio State. Actually, as you mentioned, he committed to Texas before, then decommitted and went to Ohio State, got all that NIL stuff, and then didn't really play, and then hit the transfer portal after that, which this really should be his kind of recruitment process, high school recruitment process. But instead, he's looking for his second home. And as Brian said, I agree with that point about how it's still 1 year of college football, 1 year of advanced knowledge that you wouldn't get if you were a senior in high school by any means. So, for me, Texas is always one of those programs that's like, it's super hard for me to buy into Texas. They just do it against themselves with all this Texas is back. I almost said junk, but you know what I mean? Just all that propaganda, I guess I'll say. I don't buy into it a lot. And him going back to Texas, I just kind of have this prejudice that Texas is not going to be as good because they have all this talent. I like the offense that they're going to have. I think the offense is going to be really good. I like him. I like Bijan Robinson coming back. I think Xavier Worthy is insanely talented. I think that offense is going to put up a lot of numbers, but at the same time, we don't talk about the Big 12 enough. Like the lower tier of the Big 12 is kind of another cannibalistic conference. You saw it a little bit this year. Iowa State kind of fell off. Oklahoma State dominated for most of it. Baylor dominated for most of it. TCU can knock anybody off. I mean, in Texas, they got a couple wins they weren't supposed to. West Virginia can do that sometimes too. So I feel like once you get past Oklahoma and Baylor and those teams, like it's kind of just anybody's guess at who's going to beat who. And I don't know if Texas is really ready to take that step yet. Steve Sarkisian is not one of those coaches that I think is going to have Texas like where Lincoln Riley is going to have USC right away. I think that one's going to take some time. There's some talent in defense, but they really got to step up from last year. So overall, as a team, I don't know if Texas is going to be back per se, but I think Quinn Ewers is going to be set up for success. They have I think it's the 5th ranked recruiting class in 2022. Have a lot of really good offensive linemen, Kelvin Banks being one of them. I don't know how to say the other guy, but they got another guy from Allen High School in Texas who's a 4-star, I believe. Got some good skill position. So I think he's going to be set up for the future offensively. It's just, I think Brian nailed it on the head talking about gelling with Steve Sarkisian and that offense and that system, because he's got the talent at his disposal. It's just how do they use him and set him up for success in terms of scheme and, comfort.
Can we just talk about how his second ever game is going to be against Alabama? I feel like that's kind of something that needs to be said. We can all, talk about Quinn Ewers' skill, what he did in high school, how the year at Ohio State is going to affect him. His second ever game is against Alabama and Nick Saban. That's impossible. Like he's not going to start off well. Let's be real. They're going to destroy ULM. They'll probably win by 40. And then their second game is Alabama. Okay. They're not winning that game. Let's be real. I'll say it right now. We haven't seen Texas's full team. We don't know anything about them. We don't know more moves can be made. I'll take Alabama. Then the next week they play UTSA, who's getting a decent amount of talent back. And then they're playing Texas Tech, who just got Zach Kitley as their offensive coordinator. That offense is going to be fun to watch. That's a tough 3-game stretch. That's not something you could just scoff at and be like, oh, we're Texas. We can take this. They really got to lock in for those 3 games because, blink of an eye, you can be 1-3. UTSA is a good team. Texas Tech is going to be good, maybe a little bit better than good. They're not beating Alabama. They got to kind of realize, hey, even though we're Texas, look at the last few years. We've sucked. We have sucked compared to Texas standards. Ever since that Sugar Bowl win, it hasn't been the normal look in Texas. I want to see what Quinn Ewers brings to Texas, because I don't know. I'm very skeptic. Last year, I was one of the first people that said, "Oh, you know what? I'm liking Texas. I picked them against Oklahoma." We know how that went. So as of right now, I can't buy in on Texas. It's impossible, because if you're buying in on Texas, you're essentially saying Texas is BACK, which no, the heck they're not. They have a lot of offensive talent. Quinn Ewers is a very talented quarterback, but we haven't seen it on the football field yet. It's all speculation. So right now, I'm just saying, if your second game ever is against Alabama, I'm worried. That's all I'll say for that. Man, how do we go after that? Let's talk about. I was talking about UTSA bringing back some players. Rashad Wisdom, amazing safeties, coming back for one more ride. Let's talk about players that are returning. We've talked about players that are leaving their teams or going to the draft. Let's talk about some players that are actually staying for one more year at their college. They want to have one last ride, ride off into the sunset, have a great bowl win, great season. Who are some players that you think are going to have a tremendous impact on their team because they return for one more season? Let's start with Brian on this one.
Yeah, so I want to be a little biased here. So I'm going to go with all the transfer. There's a lot of defensive transfers leaving Georgia this year, which is weird seeing it. You win the national championship, then you have like 10 players transfer. I know it's normal, but not key players. And we have a few that are leaving, but or they're going to the draft. Obviously, Nakobe Dean's gone. Jordan Davis is gone. A lot of key guys, Channing Tindall. But there's three guys that are decided to come back. One of them is Nolan Smith, who was the number 1 overall recruit a couple years ago, he has amazing talent. It's basically the three Smiths. Tyke Smith, he transferred from West Virginia, and then he tore his ACL and missed a season. He's coming back, so he's still very good. Christopher Smith, who had a huge impact for Georgia all season long. He had a pick 6 against Clemson, and he had an interception against Michigan. And then Nolan Smith, the three Smiths coming back for Georgia for one more year. And I think that's important for Georgia, who's losing such talent, whether it's to the NFL or to the transfer portal. Latavius Brini, Amir Speed. They lost obviously Nakobe Dean. A lot of these guys leaving for the NFL. To have those three guys back kind of helps you kind of solidify the defense a little bit more. You still have that leadership. You're not going to have to rely on freshmen and unproven sophomores to kind of fill in the gaps. You'll have that leadership. You'll have that experience. You'll have that championship experience to hold the front on the defensive side of the ball. And I think Nolan Smith had a kind of a slow start to his career for being the number 1 overall recruit in his class, but he's definitely picked it up the last couple of years. He's kind of been overshadowed a little bit by, other guys like Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis and stuff, and guys like that, like Channing Tindall. But he's definitely has all the talent in the world to be able to succeed and to kind of be the leader of that defense that they need. So I think having him back and having Tyke Smith and Chris Smith back for Georgia really kind of opens up the floodgates a little bit, or stops the floodgates a little bit, solidifies that defense, and then you can just fill in the gaps, and you still have that leadership and championship presence in the locker room. That'll allow them to I don't think they'll be as good as they were last year. There's a generational defense, so I don't expect that, but at least you can be still a pretty good defense with those guys solidifying and coming back and really keeping the glue for that young, unexperienced defense coming next year.
Dylan, who's your returner that you're going to watch to have a big impact?
I liked Brian's little spiel there, because now I'm feeling even better about Dan Lanning as our head coach. So I'm all for it now. I'm actually going to go with a couple. Of course, I'm going to go with a Pac-12 guy, and then I'm going to go outside the box a little bit for my other one. But I'm really excited to see Tavion Thomas come back for Utah. He's a super talented running back, a dominant running back, just a touchdown machine for them. He just had a brilliant year, and he absolutely smoked Oregon multiple times last season. But he's just really impressed me, because he came from Cincinnati, where he wasn't really finding his fit, and then he came into Utah and just exploded. And it wasn't really certain what Utah's backfield was going to look like, because I think within their first 4 or 5 games, they had 3 different 100-yard rushers. It was him, Mekhi Bernard, and TJ Pledger. And it was like, who's going to kind of break out of the bunch here? And it was Tavion Thomas. He just kind of had one dominant game, and he just ran away with that job and led the Pac-12 in rushing touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken. And so he was just brilliant. I think that Utah team is going to be at the top of the Pac-12 again, even though it's probably going to be safe to assume that the media is going to sleep on them as a Pac-12 favorite again, even though they just won the Pac-12 for the first time. Now, because Lincoln Riley's coming in, Oregon's got Dan Lanning. Some people are probably still going to be all over Arizona State or Washington for whatever gosh dang reason. But I think Utah is probably going to repeat, if I had to put money on it right now, because of guys like, Tavion Thomas coming back. Of course, the defense is going to hurt a little bit because Devin Lloyd and Nephi Sewell are both going to the NFL. But I like the talent that they have at linebacker that's still there. So I think they're going to be set. Now, outside of the box, one guy that I'm really excited to see come back is Hendon Hooker, quarterback for Tennessee. I think Tennessee is on the rise. I put them in my 5 teams that are going to be coming back to relevance in 2022. The thing is with Tennessee, though, is that their schedule makes it seem like this has to be the year if they're going to make a step, because they play at LSU. It doesn't matter what LSU team you're going up against. That's Death Valley. It's damn near impossible to win there. And then they play Alabama the next week. They play Georgia on the road, and they play South Carolina on the road. They also have a road game, non-conference game against Pitt. I'm not sure how good Pitt's going to be, but I do expect that they're going to still be a pretty competitive football team. But Tennessee, I really like the offense that's coming back. They scored almost 40 points a game. They were 4th in the SEC in total offense. They were a simple blown whistle short of winning the Music City Bowl. I really like Cedric Tillman as that number 1 receiver. He was the first receiver for Tennessee to have 1,000 yards since Justin Hunter almost 10 years ago, which that kind of blew my mind. But I think they finally have a passing offense that's, worth watching and worth caring about because of Hendon Hooker. And I know some people were saying, there's a lot of checkdowns and stuff like that with him, and he's a little inaccurate. But I think with the offense that's coming back and that run game that's going to be coming back, the offensive line seems to be set. I like that offense to be one of the most explosive in college football. But the defense kind of sucks. The passing defense is pretty bad. So I think they really need to shore up that side of the ball. But offensively, they're going to be really fun to watch. I think Hendon Hooker is the number 1 reason why.
A lot of great players. I'm going to kind of rattle off a few, not going to super depth, but I want to get a lot of names out there. Obviously, I'm going to talk about my Gophers. If you don't like it, that sucks. Mo Ibrahim, one of the best running backs in the nation. He's coming back. Chris Bell, massive contributor at the wide receiver position for us. He's coming back. John Michael Schmitz, one of, if not maybe the best center outside of Tyler Linderbaum. He's coming back. 3 massive offensive contributors coming back for the Gophers. And that defense is still going to be good. They got a lot of depth on the defensive line. That's my little Minnesota spiel. Jordan Battle for Alabama. I was shocked when I saw he was returning. He was going to be a 2nd-round pick if I had ever seen one. I mean, it's great safety. I was surprised. I mean, maybe you don't want to end your collegiate career on a loss, but at the same time, it's like the 2nd round of the NFL draft. Maybe he wanted to solidify being a 1st-round player, which he definitely can next year, which I also believe is the case for Rashad Wisdom, another safety, UTSA, that I kind of already touched on. But yeah, a lot of players making a lot of decisions. So, a lot of great talent returning, a lot of great talent going into the draft, just a lot of great talent in the country. We're having a lot of great college football games and great college football season that we just had. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on before we kind of wrap this up, Dylan O'Brien?
I did want to say there's one guy I didn't want to talk about him because I feel like there's so much. It was kind of more of it was a given that it was going to be impactful, but I do want to talk about Stetson Bennett. He's coming back for his 6th year, and to obviously JT Daniels is going to transfer, and people say that the reason why Jermaine Burton transferred is because he didn't want to catch balls from Stetson Bennett, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, I think that's Stetson Bennett coming back and getting full confidence from his teammates and his team and his coaching staff. He doesn't have to worry about that monkey on his back or that shadow behind him where, they need to put JT in. They need to put JT in. JT's not going to be there. Sure, they have, Brock Vandagriff, who's a 5-star recruit, Carson Beck, who's a 5-star recruit, Gunnar Stockton, who's a 5-star recruit. We're all behind him. So those conversations might still be there. But, he's a championship winning quarterback. He's a national championship winning quarterback. And he played you just look down the numbers. The reason why a lot of people hate on him is because he's not a 5-star quarterback. But, he played very, very well all season long. His only bad game was against Alabama in the SEC championship game. And to have a full season starting, and he's having that experience and being under center and being able to command that offense on his own without having to worry about anybody behind him, I think it's going to be very, very well. I think it's a very underrated move for Georgia, instead of having to trot out, an experienced freshman out, first game against Oregon. I think it's an underrated move for Georgia. And I think a lot of people don't like it because he is Stetson Bennett. He's just unlike, people don't like him because of what he came from. But I think it's a very, very good move for both him and Georgia. And, originally he wasn't going to go to the NFL, but maybe, you never know. Maybe he'll have a good solid season and he kind of opens the eyes a little bit. I mean, he's not 6 foot, but neither is Bryce Young, neither was Kyler Murray. They're barely tall enough. So maybe he can put himself in the NFL conversation. And I wish he will. So obviously as a Georgia fan, I do wish he will. So that's kind of my underrated, low key person I'm kind of interested to see coming back.
I was trying to stay a little bit unbiased here. I mean, I went on the low end of my bias with a Pac-12 team, but I didn't mention anybody from Oregon. But now that we're rattling off guys from our teams, I guess I might as well, right? Noah Sewell, I think, is going to be the best linebacker coming back to college football next season. And if you don't agree with that, you need to watch some tape because the dude's insane. The dude absolutely flies around the field. He runs like a gazelle at 260 pounds. Of course, he's a Sewell, so that family is just built different. He is just a dominant football player. And I think the one thing that might hamper him a little bit is that he's playing under his third defensive coordinator in 3 years. Not a lot of guys can really contribute like that. Or not a lot of guys can stay consistent and, keep learning the game, from having so many different schemes. But if anybody can do it, I think it's him. I think he's got all the talent in the world. And if Justin Flo, another 5-star guy, can come back healthy for the first time in his career, that linebacker core, there's not going to be very many better in college football than Oregon's.
Yeah, is Noah Sewell. Remember the name. If you don't already remember it, which would be kind of weird because of how amazing he is, learn the name. He's going to be fantastic next year. He's been fantastic in years past, but just watch. You'll know why. I think that's where we're going to wrap this one up. Appreciate everybody listening or watching. If you're on YouTube, make sure to press the like, subscribe, all that stuff, whatever listening platform you're on, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever it is, follow, do all that stuff. You know the deal. Appreciate y'all listening. This has been the Transfer Portal Podcast presented by NoContextCFB. Have a great day.
Dogs.